Issue 246. So this is going to be a bleak story right off the bat, because last story we just left off with a fake Sonic threatening to take over the world and Sonic being framed for it. You know, when I saw him get electrocuted, I assumed that he'd then be kidnapped and kept in a cell so that he couldn't clear his name. But I guess Grimer thinks he'd be more miserable facing the public than never having to deal with the fallout of his plan. Also, I always assumed that him being electrocuted earlier was what let Grimer gather the data to make the fake Sonics in the first place. Hence why Eggman cheered that his project was complete because he got electrocuted in space. I really wish I hadn't spoiled myself with TV tropes that all of the smear campaign stuff was going to happen, but it's better not to live with false hopes. Because I'm pretty sure none of this ever gets resolved for Sonic. We start out with Sonic holding Groucho by the necktie over a container of Megamac, saying angrily that he's been framed and he's in no mood for jokes. I mean, I totally get why he'd suspect him, because Megamac came from Chemical Planto, which, wait a minute, why the fuck is it still being manufactured here if it's not under the control of evil villains who would actually want to use it anymore? Wasn't I told that there were efforts to clean up this chemical plant and make it environmentally friendly? So why are there containers here at all? I can only assume he's making them for a big villain like Grimer, because not once in all the time he's run this planet has he threatened people with Megamac, which the factory inspectors of the world should have discovered a long time ago. Bottom line is, after Eggman was deposed, there was no reason for this plant to still exist. Sonic's told that Megamac has been going missing on the black market for years, and he can give him the answers that he wants. Then we cut to Sonic at Casino Night Zone, conveniently skipping past him speeding past civilians who would be terrified of him after last story. He lampshades Max's annoying dialogue and demands to know who the Mafia family supplied the Megamac to. I giggled when Max said that he's the fat cat with the ultimate tool of power, and Sonic said, "Big the cat is behind this?" No, get Sken. Good, that would have been ridiculous. Then in Metropolis Zone, we see Mr. Kane in the helicopter saying, much to his employees' confusion, that he's got a meeting in midair. Sonic's either in the helicopter, or has found a way to Skype with this guy. Either way, he calls him out on buying Megamac. Kane says that it's investigative journalism, and he's been trying to expose the Mafia's illegal operations. All of the Megamac that Kane purchased was destroyed with the sellers arrested. Kane looks all laid back as he reveals that KBC is getting word that Sonic's been breaking and entering, kidnapping, and attacking people across the planet. He says all smugly that it's a free planet and Sonic has to answer to the people, not giving him the answers he wants, as I'm still confused about why he'd do this to him. Then he casually mentions that Sonic might want to look into the missile heading west towards Green Hill Zone. Why would he? I guess he definitely knows that Sonic's innocent then, because why would he bother saying he might want to look into that missile if he thinks Sonic's the one who launched it in the first place? Kintabor's at least on Sonic's side, saying he's sorry, and KBC's been running news stories for months about how it's a danger to the public. For months? Was Sonic unconscious for months after being electrocuted? And people are starting to believe he'd be the next Robotnik. I mean, when you think about Scourge, it's not like an evil Sonic would be impossible. And this is a Fleetway Sonic after all. But at least explain why people are assuming he'd turn evil so easily. Like, maybe they think the smear campaign in the first place made him stop liking humanity and realize there's no point trying to be a hero if he'll be treated like a bad guy anyways. Or maybe people have been primed already to doubt him because he's always had this rude personality. But no, there's nothing. We're supposed to just take this at face value with no further explanations. Sonic highlights just how doomed the situation is because he has so many different villains that hate him that he has no idea who could have started framing him. Well, obviously it has to be someone who can make missiles, but that narrows it down a tiny bit. Most of the people he mentioned have technology to them. Kintabor tells Sonic that there should be a control panel somewhere, because he knows that somehow, and he'll see 2 wires after opening it. Then he panics and says that someone's breaking into the control center. Sadly, he cuts out before he can tell him who it was, because suspense! Because God forbid he say, X person is breaking into the control center, which is how his dialogue would realistically go. Why can't we just learn who did it right away? The plot would have gone the exact same way. Sonic reminds me that if the missile explodes, Green Hill Zone will be smothered in toxic sludge for years. Sonic fails to keep the missile from blowing up, and the news helicopters report a ridiculous news story about how it was Sonic's missile, and it killed him when he was trying to outrun it. When obviously the only reason he'd be anywhere near that missile is if he was trying to stop it. Otherwise he'd get himself killed with it. This is so forced. Are they being blackmailed to report this kind of a story? Maybe if it blew up and he was submerged in the Megamac and left nowhere to be seen, that would work, but he'd have to come out of it eventually since they wouldn't ever kill him off. It just doesn't make any sense that people would buy this. At the very least, maybe people would think that Sonic realized he was wrong to threaten the world and ended up getting himself killed trying to stop his own missile. But that's the most I could possibly stretch this to make it believable, since Sonic would have zero incentive to threaten the world. Other than I guess people are assuming that if he's hated everywhere anyways, then he might as well make the best of a bad situation and embrace being a villain to get into an actual position of power, rather than letting people who judge him have power over him. But instead of explaining that this is why people are so quick to turn on Sonic, they don't. And everyone looks like idiots. You know, Sonic would have been better off dying to that Megamac. It'd be a better fate than having to continue living on with what he'll have to go through after this. With never being able to live in Mobius ever again. Remember guys, this is Fleetway Sonic, the same douche who said to Tails that maybe he's not a complete waste of space after all. And yet this is still depressing, which proves that they're doing something wrong here. But it'd be unbearable if it were any other Sonic than this. We start out the next story with text boxes telling us that the High Academy in Hilltop Zone is notorious for their bloody-mindedness and snobbery. There's a meeting at the Academy and Rouge is spotted in it, and surprisingly turns out the guards at the Academy have cranial implants letting the images of the criminals they have to go after get sent to them. That's convenient. It makes sense in a sci-fi world. Some guards then wonder how Rouge could have gotten something past the metal detector. I don't think we'll ever know the answer to that, as she teleports away right before she can be tasered. She tricks the guards into destroying a wall, and it turns out she hacked the camera system as the target's not here. The story ends with Rouge silently dropping a bomb next to the Duke's meeting. Whoever the Duke is. The zone leader, I guess. So what's her motivation? What's her reason for doing any of the things she's doing? I wasn't invested in this boring story at all because there's no logic behind her random destructiveness against a random boring academy I don't care about. In the next story, after Shorty predictably loses the fight to the stronger looking monster, the Regiment sends some guards to surround the guy for Plan B, and the big guy kidnaps Shorty and Techno, and gives the Regiment enough gold to distract him away from trying to help them. It turns out they were brought to a pyramid by Set, the god of chaos. I thought he was sent to the limbo between zones, which would have caused him to eventually die of dehydration and so on. Apparently, he was capable of teleporting all along then, so why didn't he just immediately teleport back to Sonic that day and defeat him? Either this is an alternate universe set, or this is stupid writing. They're never gonna explain this. Though I'll admit, I was still pretty hyped to see him come back as a villain, and for a story arc with good art this time. The first story was by both Ed Reynolds and Jamie J, and was about Sonic ultimately being framed for a missile with Megamac exploding on Green Hill Zone, and his friends being injured, with only Kintobor knowing the truth, only for him to get turned off before he could tell Sonic who broke into the control center. You know, logic would dictate that rather than saying someone broke in, he would have told him the name of that person right away. Whatever. I just don't understand why the news helicopters would assume Sonic wasn't trying to stop the missile when he was right at its site. So the only reason he'd be risking his life like that was from trying to stop it. If Oscara, who is established to have brainwashing powers, and body-switching powers was the reason everyone believed Sonic turned evil so easily, that would perfectly explain all of this right away. Oscara could have been explained to have brainwashed everyone against him, and it could have been him who was the fake Sonic, ruining his reputation. It's the Ixis issue 224 problem all over again, where if a villain used brainwashing, it would make everything so much less frustrating. You know what I realized recently? Maybe I would have enjoyed the story about Sonic with the Megamac missile more if he actually did try to take over the world with it and then changed his mind and tried to stop it. I mean, Sonic's always been a jerk in this comic, and it would be interesting to see him make a major mistake and slip up from severe amount of stress. They could explain it as him snapping from people not liking him anymore and wanting to get power over them for a change. And like, it's Fleetway Sonic. I would believe him to have an evil moment way more than any other Sonic. But instead, he was completely innocent, wasting an opportunity for an interesting plot, and him being hated as a villain was frustrating as a result, rather than correct. I'd want it to be temporary, of course, so he could go back to being a hero afterwards, but that would have justified him being banished from Mobius properly because he made a huge mistake. Though I think like the whole reason they wrote the smear campaign arc was supposed to feel like karma against Fleetway Sonic. But because they're not focusing on the right things, it doesn't feel like he deserves it, which kind of defeats the purpose. The second story was by Robert Fraser. It was a boring story where Rouge, with no logic and motivation, ends up destroying an academy without even any dialogue from her. Why? What could she or anyone have to gain from that? Why should I care about this place? What a waste of comic space. She's supposed to be a jewel thief. She should be stealing jewels. And the third story was by Mike Corker and had Shorty and Techno get kidnapped by someone whose master turns out to be Set, the Egyptian alien god. I really hope they explain how he survived being thrown into the limbo between zones. I could believe that he was actually sent to another dimension just in time, but you'd think Techno would have known that if he was. Well, I'm still excited to see him again. It's just silly. Why would he go after Techno and Shorty and not Sonic, who was the one who completely humiliated him? If he had kidnapped Sonic, he wouldn't have to be on Mobius right now.